computer. Hey, good afternoon. This is Betty Novak with Life Path Associates. I'm an executive career coach, and I'm glad to be working and talking with Michelle on this podcast. Michelle
Hi.
Teague is here. Guess what?
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Teague from A Teague of Your Own. I'm also an executive coach, and I'm excited that we're together again today, Betty. This is going to be a great topic that a lot of organizations are going to want to listen to.
And it also comes up in the news, almost daily, definitely 1 or 2 days a week, when everybody is sharing the statistics from the, Bureau of Labor and other types of groups that offer that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're talking about inflation today. And specifically, we're talking about how inflation is impacting wages and what organizations are doing about it. Because if you ask me, organizations are kind of between a rock and a hard place right now when it comes to wages, Betty.
Yep, that's true.
Yeah,
they're really struggling.
They are. There was this great resignation, which we've talked about previously. And you also had this round of layoffs, which we've talked about previously. And as a result, employers are having a difficult time finding and keeping good people. And so they're having to pay them more than they've had to pay them in the past.
Yes, and also, I think I told a story a while ago about a owner chef of a very, I don't know where it was, but it was a very nice restaurant that was more seafood restaurant right on the boardwalk. And he said, well, something, he said, I needed people because people were coming back. And one day this guy showed up, and he was a chef from one of my competitors. And I said, why are you applying? He said, because you pay more and I like the way you run business. So that's what's going through, good employees. And I don't mean good because you're bad, but employees that really are working now but still looking around.
Exactly. And employees, they've got options right now. Just about everybody has a help wanted sign out there. And as a result, like I said, employers are having to pay more to get better employees. And one of the places that's reporting this is the Economic Policy Institute. They were talking about how wages have gone up. If you ask me, it's a significant increase. I mean, wages have gone up over 4% just in the last quarter. And when you look at what's happened in the past year, they've gone up quite a lot. And the Bureau of Labor and Statistics is showing just in the past year how back in May of 2021, the average hourly rate in May of 2021 was $30.36. They're projecting the average hourly rate in May of 2022 is $31.95. So that's up almost $1.60.
Yeah, I remember my husband, we were really excited. We had moved to Pittsburgh, and we had no money because our didn't have our nice government job at a total of $150,000 a year. So when we had to move to Pittsburgh because of my husband's family, he finally got a job, and he worked as a specialist for the local gas and energy company, EQT. And he said, well, should I do it? Because I'm going to have to go to Charleston and I'll come back on the weekends. And I said, don't let the door hit you on the way out. I said, it's $25 a hour is great,
Mhm.
just go for it until, because he was a temp, go for it. They ended up offering a job. So, but still, I said, don't think about it. Just go.
Just go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And think about how much wages have gone up since then.
I know. And I can't imagine, being a business owner and having worked for entrepreneurs and how they may be struggling now. I mean, we're talking hair cuttery, Sambo Seasons, Popeyes, Legs. I'm sure they're struggling because one, we're always seeing, as you said, help signs where the fast food and some restaurants are, need people. And then the other thing is they're having to pay this high wage, which is $15 or more or more for a hourly. And then probably 31, I would imagine 31.95 and up is what you're paying, maybe up to $50 an hour for a manager.
Right.
But
And
they're
when
seeing
you,
the food costs go up,
oh my gosh,
like
yes.
bacon, and that's McDonald's specialty, right? Bacon, 48%. I saw that this morning. I was like flipping. And eggs have gone up even higher percent. And there goes your breakfast sandwich, guys. And
Exactly.
so now it's like, I would admit, haven't eaten McDonald's in a while, but I would tell you that they've either that they have increased the cost that you go out with $20 instead of $10 when you're buying the same stuff. And I'm not just saying McDonald's, I mean everybody.
Yeah, it's across the board. Everyone you're seeing this increase in what it costs to go out and eat. You're seeing an increase in what it costs to just go to the grocery store. And part of that is the cost of goods and services are going up, and the cost to hire people is going up. If you're a CEO of a company, and you and I are both CEOs of our own company.
We're both CEOs. And we contract out, and that's gotten more expensive.
Oh, yeah.
An hour.
And when you're the CEO of a company, if you're a publicly traded company, like you were mentioning, McDonald's, or if you're a Walmart or any of the fast food places, CEO and upper leadership, the main thing that they have to do is they have to maximize shareholder wealth. And the way to do that is to decrease the expenses that you have. And when it comes down to it, wages are an expense. Payroll is an expense. And the less money you spend on that, the higher your profits can go up. But it's a fine line that you've got to balance there, because you need enough people to be able to get the job done. And if you get to the point where you don't have enough workers, you're not going to be as productive. You're not going to be as efficient. You won't be as effective as you can be. And so you're not going to be able to sell as much. And so you've got to have enough workers there. But at the same time, if you're overpaying them, that's cutting into your profits. And with the rates that have been going up for hiring some of these workers, when you're looking at, like you said, $15 an hour, starting out in some of these retail and fast food establishments, that's a lot of money for people who don't necessarily have the skills that employers used to pay for. Think about your first job that you had, Betty, and think about what they were paying you to do.
Like you, I was in college and I was having a tough year. And I decided, rather than socializing and beating up my grades, I asked the dean, I said, can I go get a job? And I got a job waitressing. I had never waitressed in my life. And it was below the minimum wage because they felt tips were going to make up for it. Later, a law was passed that you had minimum wage, you had an hourly wage, and you got the tips. But that wasn't the case for years and years and years. So you worked really hard to get those tips. And I worked in retail like Saks and Neiman's, and you were, I think my Neiman Marcus job was $2.50 an hour. when I got out of college, and you that's all you got. You could get a bonus, but that was so very rare and depended on the department you were in. So there's a lot of things to be said for. There are good things to be said for what's going on and bad things.
Oh, yeah.
They're raising people's lifestyle
Yeah.
if people can manage it, but they're putting people at risk because, like you said, they may be reducing the workforce in hours.
Oh,
So
yeah.
they don't, like 20 hours, so they don't have to pay the amount of compensation that they pay for somebody who is 25 hours and above, right? 21 hours and above. So they're doing that. Others are looking for technology and bringing in computers. I mean, not computers, robots. And we're not talking robots like we've seen in some of the news where you have a robot coming out and the food is on a tray and they're bringing it out to you, right? And you reach for it, right? No, these are robots that are going up and down the aisles, picking up and delivering mail and maybe food, snacks. So, I mean, used to be a lady and a young guy. They used to do that. So.
Exactly. And when you think about it, I know for years you would have a debate every time somebody would want to talk about raising minimum wage and how when you raise minimum wage, companies that hire people at minimum wage instantly stop hiring people, and it forces people out of the labor market who don't necessarily have the skills to get higher paying jobs. And for decades, that's been a lot of the teenagers, a lot of the people going to college and just trying to make some extra money to work their way through. And so you have a lot of these people who at this point, they're starting to get pushed out, you're right, by technology. Because it's going to end up being cheaper to bring in the technology and the artificial intelligence that runs it than it's going to be to hire people to perform the exact same jobs and tasks.
And I think the Great Resignation did two things. One is it put the businesses and companies at risk. Companies are laying off. Some of them are even closing or definitely having a merger and acquisition, which also shakes up. You can't have two people for one job.
Right.
And then, but the other thing is it gives an opportunity, like we said the last time, for people who are in the know and people who want to work, that you can find a higher paying job than maybe you had before, because there are slots and gaps and so forth. But you have to know how to get it and what to do. It's not just a resume. But going back to the businesses, the other thing that I remember when I was working for a number of companies is that if your store, and we mean a store like a restaurant or a salon or so forth, if your store is not making the money that they thought it would, and the money is going out because of the real estate costs, your rental, or mortgage if you bought it. And so now more people are going to be laid off, or they'll be asked to go to other stores that are farther away from their houses. And there you are, you have, $4 to $5, $7 per gallon of gas. I mean, they're starting to do carpools. Actually, oh darn, one of the private pickups where they come, they're starting to have a carpool service.
And one of my husband works for Pitt and Johnstown. He is not thrilled about the prospect of paying $5 plus a gallon of gas to drive the hour it takes to get to campus and then drive back from campus, all those miles. It's even at upper level wages, inflation is hitting employees, and they're wanting a bigger pay raise. Forget about, hiring people. Let's talk about the people you already have and what type of pay raises that you're giving them, because they're not going to have enough money to pay their bills and put gas in the car and drive to work and put groceries on the table, because what you've given them isn't keeping up with the rate of actual inflation. When you
Yeah,
got,
that's
yeah,
exactly right. Yeah. Mhm. I mean,
because
I can see that because uh, the news is always saying people are the current administration say everything's going. Now, that's not a political statement. Everything's going well. But when you look under the table,
yeah,
things aren't going well because people are starting to tap into their retirement fund. They're draining their savings and so forth, losing their home. I mean, that's not a good sign of what's going on. Yeah.
no,
So,
there's a lot of things going on under underneath. When you pull back the cover and you pull back what's going on, and you can see for sure what is going on underneath it all, it's not a pretty sight.
no. And some companies and businesses can minimize it by going to technology the best way they can. Even small companies. Hey, what do we have a couple of us, right? Our companies, and there we are. And so we're using Zoom and other types of technology to be able to connect and to market and so forth. So there's so much technology out there. Some businesses can't do a lot of technology, but they can do some technology to minimize everything. And one thing I want to say though, thinking of businesses and thinking of CEOs, if I was a CEO in a bigger business, which I've been involved with, is look to see how is your business really run? Have you really looked at it recently? And look and see what is really the main business model that you're working, and does it work anymore in this current? And how do you really keep the best and the people who aren't doing well and were poor performers before the pandemic? You have to try to easily lay them off and maybe somehow help them find a job that works with their skills in another place, because they may have been mismatched. They just fell into the job or got promoted in a position that they should never have gotten promoted. So you have a quote, a fiduciary responsibility to be looking at your people, your system, HR systems, and also your operation systems to see if there's places that you can save but not reduce profit or performance.
I agree. I think back in 2020, you saw a lot of organizations doing that. When the pandemic first hit, they had time where they could take a look at the systems they had in place. They could take a look at the people that they had in place, and they could right size their companies. There's a term that we haven't heard in quite a while.
Yeah.
But they could make sure that they had the right people in the right places, and then they had that break for some of them that lasted way too long. But companies took the time to figure out what's going to work best for us. Then things start to ramp back up again. And unfortunately, we're reaching the point now where things did indeed ramp back up. However, with the rates of inflation that are happening, it's costing businesses more to do business. And unless they raise their prices for consumers, they're going to have to cut expenses somehow.
And again, I know the restaurant trade and I know the retail trade, and what the retail trade does this by reducing their stock or getting stock that doesn't cost as much, and the consumer saying, oh, this isn't as good as they used to sell. And then the other thing with food, if I had a restaurant, I would reduce my menu to what we specialize in. We're not going to just offer everything and market to say that this is what we offer you and this is why it's so good, and come and try it. So
Yes. And
these are coming down the pike. I don't think they've quite come down the pike yet. But
one of the things, I think you've noticed this too, are the service charges that you're seeing added to bills.
Yep. Yeah. We just moved to Tennessee, and I'm originally from New York, and we moved from the DC area. And so we were missing some types of food, and we saw this Italian place, Roma 3, and it was interesting because I said, well, let's try it. They say they have, sorry, they say they have a New York pizza, and the food looks phenomenal. Now, I came from Pittsburgh, and there's a lot of really good Italian restaurants there.
Yeah.
So we ordered, and we didn't want to go and pick it up, so we ordered it to be brought to us. It was an $8 surcharge from Grubhub plus a tip they charged. And then you look at 2 levels of taxes that are put on it, and probably the food, since I didn't know it before, I'd imagine the food's gotten a little more expensive. So now where you got a pizza and something on the side, it became like $31. And by the time you ended up getting it delivered, I was shocked. It was $61. I nearly flipped. I know. I said, Marty, did they do the math wrong? They didn't do the math wrong. No. He said, well, we're going to actually make sure we pick it up, and we're careful as to what we buy. We don't buy a lot on the menu, just what we want at the time. Right. But we're semi-retired. I mean, my husband's retired. And we've noticed when we go to the grocery store that we don't eat meat, really. So we're lucky. But even the vegetables and the canned goods are going up, and we're coming out. I know people would say this isn't much, but it is a lot. $130, $200 for a typical vegetable run. It's
exactly.
It's tough.
I know, and even when you're going to the farmers markets, farmers are having to increase their prices, and it's because the labor that they have, it's costing them more. B, the fuel to run their vehicles is just astronomical.
Because they don't have fertilizer,
right? And most of them use diesel.
It's hard to get
fuel for their vehicles, and diesel is just outrageous right now. And you're right, when you've got different types of fertilizers, and you got to spread all that, it's getting expensive for farmers to produce crops, and they've got to pass that cost along to consumers. So even if you go to your local farmers market thinking, all right, well, it's going to cost me less to go there, it's still going to be more expensive than it has been in the past.
And I think it sounds like this is a real downer, but I think this is opportunity, for us to do things differently. Like when my father-in-law was alive, he had half of the backyard as a farm. I mean, as a crops, and it was great. Marty had done some with it, but as we continued on and went into sort of our Mediterranean type of diet, we ended up doing more vegetables. And Marty put them in containers, because I said, you're killing your back. Don't do that. Put them in containers. And he brought the containers to Tennessee, and that's saving us, because we have a lot of vegetables he'll can, or we can eat raw or cook. That is that's going to save us this summer. And in Tennessee, he can have a second growing season.
Yes.
So, but that, we didn't think of that. And one last thing on that, I noticed, I was looking at stuff, and then I heard somebody say, hey, if you have an apartment, here is a way to grow your food in an apartment. So out on the patio, out on the, deck, whatever. And so more people are starting to go and figure out how they're going to grow a little tomato plant, or grow more food as they can, as opposed to going out and buying it.
Exactly. And I know the neighborhood I used to live in, several of my neighbors would have gardens where they would grow vegetables. And what we would all try and do is coordinate what we grew. So that way somebody would have tomatoes, somebody would have zucchini, somebody would have peppers, and you would just
Nice,
share
yeah. Yeah.
among each other because you'd always have so much. So that's the other thing is you can literally create your own co-op when it comes to vegetables and fruits.
When we lived in DC on Connecticut Avenue, there was a plot. Nobody knew what to do with the plot. And I don't think they know really who owned it, really. And all of a sudden, there was a community garden there, and people were able to eat because there were some other years that were lean. People were able to eat through that garden, and they really enjoyed it because it, like you said, brought communities together.
Yeah,
so.
and it's a cool thing to be able to do. I used to have pear trees in my front yard.
Wow.
And when those pears would be ready, I would announce it to anyone and everyone. And you'd see on the weekends just people coming with huge bags to fill up. And then they'd go home and they would end up canning all these pears and stuff. And it was delicious. But
Now we're in Georgia peach season.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, my favorite is you can get them in South Carolina and Grafton really well, and in Georgia obviously, but in Tennessee they're bringing Georgia peaches over to us from Western Georgia.
Yep.
So,
nice.
So then go ahead, sorry.
That's part of what people are having to do though because of inflation. Because of the costs of everything going up so much, they're having to do things like that to save money anywhere they can.
That's right. But the other thing that we talked about before, and we'll talk in the future more, is what happened during the pandemic. Excuse me, my dog wants to. I'm going to stop the video for a minute. Pause the recording. Sorry about that. I had to let my dogs out. They were having a real hissy fit. I didn't want you to hear it. So go ahead, continue what you were saying, Michelle.
We were talking about inflation and how it's this ripple effect really is what's going on. That's what you are seeing at this point is you're seeing a ripple effect. And the only way out of inflation is to pull money out of the economy. I mean, that's the reality, is to increase interest rates, and B, reduce the supply of actual cash that is out there available for people to spend. And with what's happening with companies and organizations, that's not going to be something that they can easily do.
I agree. They can't. I mean, it's just not easy to do it. I mean, you need a certain amount of cash base to be able to run your business. And I mean, some people now, personally, some people are buying gold and silver if they can afford it. A lot of people can't afford it, but that's hedging your bets to a certain extent. I think the other way that you as a person can hedge your bets is to go and to look at yourself and see what skills you weren't working on, or the flip side is what skills did you learn that were new? Because a lot of people suddenly became continuous new learners. What skills did you see and how can you market them and who do you want to market it to? And again, that's for another thing, because there's a whole big set of, there's a whole bunch of resources and tools that you can use to be able to have a very comprehensive job search and negotiate a career shift, like in a promotion. Even though you don't think it's going to happen, but it's a little more complicated during a recession, which is what we're going into, unfortunately.
I agree.
But the percentage, the interest rates are, to some people, they're astronomical. To us, in the 80s, they aren't quite there, but they're headed that way, which makes it very difficult for young people to be able to afford a house or or a
Yeah.
car.
Well,
Even if
and
it's there. I mean, even if the car is on the lot,
the other thing is it makes it more expensive for businesses to expand. They can't, because the interest rates are going up, it's harder for them to take out loans to buy more space and to, increase the number of buildings that they have, or to buy more machinery, or to buy more equipment, because it's costing them more too. It's hitting everybody.
It's true. I mean, in New York, it seems that we know Florida isn't having a problem. If anything, the problem it's having is it doesn't have enough, right? But
Right.
New York seems to be, some of the real estate people come on and talk on the shows, and it seems like the young people are flocking to New York, and
Mhm.
so they're willing to pay the high prices, which to me is like, wow, it's real high. I've
I
never
know.
seen anything like that, and I'm from New York originally, so the places like where I am, it hasn't quite hit, but it's going to start hitting. I mean, we bought a house for a mortgage 50% less than what you would do to rent an apartment. There
Exactly.
wasn't any reason we couldn't rent an apartment just to wait for a house.
No.
So,
No. And the other thing is, the mortgage that you did get, the interest rate is locked in, so it's less than what you could get now.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's a number of percentage
Yeah.
points less. Well, so what's the bottom line? What's the summary of all this that might be good news or recommendations for people that are watching this podcast?
The good news is, like we said before, the jobs are out there, and employers are having to offer higher wages. The bad news is, the reason why they're having to offer the higher wages is because there's a smaller labor pool, and you've got this inflation rate going up. Plus, the reality is, wages are not keeping up with the rate of inflation.
Inflation, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think it would behoove anybody, business wise or personal, to look at financial planning and management,
Yes.
and also look at, again, what's your future, rethink where you want to go from here, and what type of lifestyle that you want to live, and how this is the time where you can try to marry both of them. I don't think there's really ever been a time where you could really think and say, I want my life and this is how I'm going to work, and I'm going to find it, I'm going to negotiate it, and I'm going to be able to get it.
I agree. All right. Well,
Yeah,
this has been a great conversation today.
I agree. It started out with sort of small
Yeah.
points, and it ended up being a really great conversation. So
Yes.
thank you, Michelle. That was great. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Betty. And I hope our viewers here will join us in a couple of weeks when we have our next Coffee with Two Coaches.
Yes, we look forward to seeing you. Well, having you hear us and you seeing us, and see you in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
I think I stopped it.
You didn't.
I didn't. Oh, well, I'm such a technical klutz.